Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Welcome to our All Things Tech Leadership podcast. I conduct this podcast every week, Thursday at 11 a.m. Central. I invite leaders of product, engineering, and the startup ecosystem. And today we have the pleasure to introduce a HR or human capital expert in Malvika Jethmalani. Malvika, I'm super excited to have you uh, because I have seen personally the impact of collaborating with a top-notch HR person in an organization as an organization scales. And I've had two of my clients, I've had that experience. I was fortunate to have them. And while I was an employee several years ago, I was involved in that as well. And it impacts the bottom line. Having the
Mhm.
right HR leader, uh, and some people call it people organization, people leader, whatever
Yeah.
the title might be. Uh, More recently, they've switched gears there, but
Mhm.
whatever the title might be, uh, it is impactful. It's a pleasure hosting you. Before I get to introductions, let me mention a few administrative items, and then we'll switch to introductions. But no, I am super excited. I'm looking forward to learning as much as any member of the audience because I know the direct impact it could make. But from an administrative perspective, this is an Ask Me Anything event. So if you're listening in live, you can ask a question, and Malvika would be happy and excited to give responses to your questions. The way to There are two ways to ask a question. One is if you are listening in live, if there's a comment box at the bottom of the screen, you can type in your question, and as you type in your question, both Malvika and myself would be able to see the question. And if Malvika is engrossed in a prior response, I would read the question, and Malvika would respond. So that's one way of asking the question. If you prefer asking the question in an anonymous way where you don't want visibility into your question from others, if you want it in an anonymous manner, you can go to my profile and you can send me a direct message. It's anonymous to the extent that I know who you are, but nobody else does. If you prefer to ask a question in that way, yeah, go there. You can DM me whether you're connected to me or not, and I will look for notifications on my. I have a tab open for LinkedIn, so I will look for notifications, and if I see one, I will read out the question out. So you can ask questions either way, but we encourage and love questions. That is how to make the session more interactive and engaging. And more importantly, you get your tough questions answered. It's a way to do that. So, in terms of introduction, Malvika is a three-time CHRO. Now that's impressive by itself. She has over 15 years of experience transforming global workplace cultures. And as I mentioned, uh, if you're fortunate enough to have worked with uh, an expert like Malvika, you can see the impact to the bottom line immediately. So that is, I'm going to, as after I introduce myself, I'm going to switch it back to you, Malvika, to elaborate on your introduction. So I'm going to
Great.
give it back to you. I just gave a snippet and a peek, just a small peek into what to expect. But I'm going to let you elaborate on your background. And The other thing I'm excited about before I go to my introduction, because I am truly excited about hosting you today, but we are going to focus on two. of my favorite topics. We're going to focus on three different topics, but two of them are my absolute favorite. Uh, so we're going to talk about scaling, and I love scaling because I love to scale my technology, my architecture, the technology organization. So I love scaling in general. The second topic is data, and I love it too. I love looking at data. I love analyzing data. I love interpreting data. I love presenting data. And so we're going to talk about data as it relates to people, human capital. And the third thing, and this is Malvika's one of her core expertise areas, is resilience. We're going to talk about that. So let me just, for the benefit of the audience, let me also introduce myself. I am founder of Delens. Founders, B2B founders, and tech companies, normally less than 50 million in revenues, experience challenges in scaling, innovating, and growing due to lack of access to experienced tech leadership. At Delens, we address this challenge directly through our fractional CTO services, where our customers do not need to commit to a full-time hire. We have been in business since 2016, that's 8 years now, 8.5 years, and we have consultants across the globe, across different verticals as well. So I've been hosting this podcast for 1.5 years now, and this is my way of learning from a different guest. And with that introduction, I'm going to hand it over back to Malvika to introduce herself for the audience. Yeah, go ahead, Malvika.
Ram, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm sure I'm going to learn a lot from you as well. So thank you. A little bit about me. So as Ram said, I am Malvika Jethmalani. I'm a 3-time CHRO, and I'm the co-founder of Atvis Group, which is a human capital advisory firm driven by the core belief that to win in the marketplace, businesses must first win in the workplace. And I, like you, Ram, firmly believe that human capital strategies, when executed properly, can have a direct impact on the bottom line. So what we're going to talk about today is critical. And although I've spent my entire career in human resources, I did not start in human resources. I started my career in accounting and finance. And so because I have that background and that training, I don't consider myself a traditional HR leader. I tend to be very data oriented and analytical in everything that I do from a people perspective. So my core skill set is I help organizations draw insights out of data and analytics to inform their people decisions.
Fantastic. Thank you for that introduction. And I like your ability and intent and desire and skills to look at data and make people decision based on that. Now that's by itself impressive, because when I have met HR leaders in the past, they come from a people perspective. They talk about EQ. And I'm sure, of course, that is important. They talk about EQ. They talk about empathy. They talk about first seek to understand. But all that said, maybe you can let's start with data. How do you? So give me an example of, and so the audience understands, how do you use data? What's an example of a data point that you use to make human capital decisions?
Yes. So first of all, data is huge, but you need accurate data first. In every single HR leadership role that I've had to first look at, do we have the right data, and do we have the quality of data that we need? Because if not, then you need to spend some time doing the less glamorous work, which is cleaning up the data, to make sure that you are using the right data set to inform your people decisions. And then you also need to be aware of, data is useful, but there's leading indicators and there's lagging indicators. So for example, in the HR world, one of the things that we like to look at is turnover. And turnover data is fantastic. You want to look at if you have high employee turnover, for example, you want to look at turnover by department, by office location, by country, region. You want to look at it by tenure. So years of service. Are newer employees leaving faster or more tenured employees leaving? So all of that is helpful, but turnover in and of itself is a lagging indicator. When people leave and you do exit interviews and they tell you why they're leaving, it's helpful information, but they've already made the decision to leave. So there's nothing you can do about it at that point. So if you want to look at leading indicators, if you're having turnover issues, for example, I would encourage you to look at things like your engagement survey or employee sentiment analysis, or even look at your stay interview data if you're doing stay interviews. So again, data is important, but you need to understand, do you have the right quality of data? Do you have the right data sets to inform the decisions that you're trying to make? And you need to differentiate between leading and lagging indicators.
Fantastic. Yeah. No, I love that you mentioned clean data. The vast, I would say, all projects, especially the AI rated projects, which are data intensive required, data intensive, people focus on algorithms. They want to get to the algorithms, they want to get to the cool stuff, the presentation layer, but in the absence of and that applies to all areas. Not, and of course, I can see that it applies to human capital. So I mean, cleaning up. So do you engage? So do you then engage teams to help you clean the data, or do you get involved, or what is your level of involvement in cleaning up of data? Just curious.
In my CHR, in all my 3 CHRO positions, I have had to roll up my sleeves and get involved myself in cleaning up the data. Usually I have an analyst or someone with an analytical background helping me, but I roll up my sleeves and get involved. I feel like once I have a clean data set, and once I have shown the team how to obtain clean data and maintain the integrity of the data, then I can pull back a little bit and have the team prepare reports and dashboards, etc. But in the beginning, I like to be very involved. It's also important, I think, to not just use data and sort of throw up dashboards, on the screen for your leadership team to look at. I think a lot of people forget the importance of storytelling through data. And it's not a compelling story or a compelling business case for the CEO and the leadership team to sit up and listen if all you're doing is throwing charts on the screen and expecting them to sort of make sense of it. So my philosophy around that is, give them the data, which is the what, give them the so what, which is why should they care? What does this mean for them, for their business? And then give them the now what. So what are we going to do next? What is our recommendation? What are the actions that we need to take based on the data that we're looking at and based on the learnings that we've had?
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And I can see that in the lagging indicator that you talked about, turnover. You talk about why that's important. It may be a future need prevention. But and that's why they should care about it. While it's, even though it's a lagging indicator, that's a nice. So do you show your stories via presentations, or how because that's important. How you convey the story is important. What is your what guidance would you give the audience on how to convey a story?
So my preference is to use Word documents. I think it was, I can't remember if it was Amazon or Google that has
it's Amazon.
They have the page-led meetings.
Right.
And I really like that style of storytelling and presenting information, because I find that in a Word document where you have to very clearly articulate your thoughts in every aspect of the story that you're trying to tell, you can't hide behind it. I find that PowerPoints can sometimes be unclear or vague or easy to hide behind, but you have to, of course, do whatever is consistent with your culture and your team norms and your organizational norms and how your leadership team likes to receive information and likes to be communicated to. But I would say that even if you are using a PowerPoint, create a PowerPoint that stands on its own, where people can look at it and understand what is going on and the story that you're trying to tell without the voiceover.
Right. So for those listening in live, you got a sense of Malvika's background. So definitely we encourage you to ask questions and interrupt the flow. I do see some notifications. Let me see if it's a question before I ask you my next question. All right. Not yet, but do ask your questions. Let's move on to my second favorite topic, which is scaling. Yeah, so some Raja Ranganathan, Amazon 6-page memo culture.
Yes,
That's
there you
right.
go.
Yeah, I remember reading that. Thanks for the memory jog, Raja. Thank you for that. All right. The next question is scaling. Um, so what is scaling? How should one prepare for scaling? And just let's first talk about this, the quantitative aspect of scaling. What are you talking about? Are you talking of 10 to 100? Are you talking of, so you set the context and then talk about how do I prepare for that and what do I need to be cautious about and what do I do? Yeah, just talk through that. Yeah.
Yeah, so first of all, I think it's important to understand the distinction between scaling and growing. When you are scaling your business, you want to typically you want to make sure that you are driving profitable and sustainable growth, not just growth for growth's sake. And especially now in our current environment of capital efficiency, pretty much everyone is focused on profitable growth. And so when I think about scaling, in my experience, I have typically come into organizations when they're around 100 to 200 employees and helped them scale to multiple hundreds of employees or even thousands. And so your question about scaling and how do we scale effectively, I think so much of it comes down to prioritization. This is something I see almost every organization and founder or CEO struggle with, regardless of size and shape of organization. A lack of focus means that people are stretched really thinly. People don't know what to prioritize or how to prioritize. They don't know how to make the appropriate trade-offs. And that can start to get in the way of execution. And so, unfortunately, what happens in a lot of organizations as they're trying to scale, because they're trying to do so much, they end up becoming mediocre at a bunch of things rather than being really, really good at a few things.
So, from a recent example, what did the organization prioritize that made an impact? So, I'm not clear. I mean, yeah, what would be an example of a good priority when you scale from 100 to say 1,000?
So I think, first of all, you need to prioritize your business initiatives. If you have, 10 business priorities every year, that's going to make it difficult for people to allocate resources appropriately to make the tough trade-offs decisions. And so one of my favorite prioritization tools that I like to use is just a simple 2x2 matrix, an impact matrix. So you look at which of your initiatives are low or high impact, which of your initiatives have low or high, will require low or high effort. And so you have kind of a 2x2, your impact on the y-axis, your effort on the x-axis, and then you start to fill in your priorities and your initiatives into each of the quadrants to figure out which ones are your big projects. So things that are high impact, high effort are going to be your big projects. So think of the really strategic priorities that require cross-functional collaboration, that require executive sponsors. You want to focus on those things. Things that are low effort, high impact are your quick wins. So these are important, especially to gain momentum in the beginning and to help the team build confidence, to inspire confidence in your people. And then you kind of start to look at the rest of it and see, do we need to work on the low impact things? Are they really that important? Can we maybe outsource some of them? Can we go through a build, buy, or Gen AI exercise on some of those things? And so that is one of my favorite ways to prioritize and make sure that you're scaling without causing change fatigue in the organization.
No, that's a fantastic way to explain prioritization. We have a question from the audience. Rama, thank you for your question. Curious to understand the role of CHRO in an organization doing major transformation.
That is such an important question and one that does not get asked or discussed enough. So thank you for asking that, Rama. My perspective would be the CHRO plays probably one of the most important roles during a transformation. I think about the CHRO role as kind of the chief performance officer of the organization. So you're ensuring that through before and throughout and after the transformation, the organization is continuing to hit its objectives. People are continuing to meet the expectations of their role. So you want to make sure that the trains are running on time, that things are getting done on time, and the organization is on the path to meet its objectives. And you want to think of yourself as kind of guiding and coaching and steering. So although everyone needs to be involved in a transformation and the tone is set at the top by the CEO and the entire leadership team, and the CEO is in the driver's seat, you are the GPS. You are the navigation system. You are steering and directing and coaching your leaders to go in the right direction, and also coaching them to all together march in the same direction. So that is kind of how I would think of it. You have your CEO in the driver's seat, you have your CHRO who's the navigation system, but everyone is still in the car and everyone needs to go in the same direction together.
Right, fantastic. Thank you, Rama, for that great question. I just got a question in my direct message in my inbox. Malvika, as the organization scales, we need to hire in large numbers. How do I ensure that there are processes in place to hire the right kind of candidates?
Again, such an important question, and one that I could probably write a full 3-page article about, but I will try to summarize my thoughts. So first of all, I want to say this. In my experience, especially in the last few years, what I've noticed is this cycle of we do fundraising and then we hire a bunch and then we realize that we can't possibly onboard all of these people all at the same time without compromising productivity, without compromising culture, without compromising quality of hire. And then we end up doing layoffs. So we're in this kind of vicious rinse and repeat cycle of fundraising, hiring, layoffs, fundraising, hiring, layoffs. So to get out of that cycle, go ahead.
And hiring back again, right? It's a circle.
And hiring back again. Exactly. We lay off and then we hire again in 6 months, sometimes for the same positions. So, and these are decisions that, we're kind of laughing about them, but these are decisions that impact people's lives and their livelihood. So these should not be taken lightly at all. So now coming back to the second part of the question that this individual asked, how do I ensure that, was it about quality of hire? How do I ensure quality of hire?
The process for quality of hires. That's what the question is.
Yeah. So there are a few ways to accomplish that. First of all, in all of my positions that I hire for, I like to do what I call an audition. So there's some technical job related aspect of your role that you need to prove that you can do it, that you have that skill set. So for a sales position, for example, it might be doing a pitch, like a mock pitch to a client. For an analyst position, it might be, you give them a set of data and they make sense of it, and they use that data to tell a story about what's going on and what recommendations they would make, right, to our earlier conversation. So it doesn't have to be these 6-hour take-home exercises. I'm not talking about that, because we want to focus on candidate experience as well, but making sure that there's some way to audit or assess the candidate's job-related skills, the core skills. The other thing that I really like to do is, again, coming back to using Amazon as an example, they have a process called bar raisers. So they have a bar raiser interview where they have a team of bar raisers who are specifically trained to, as it sounds, raise the bar on the talent coming into the organization. And these are typically people who are not part of the hiring team. They're part of a different team that are coming in to make sure that the candidate, you've already assessed them on the job related skills, but they're coming in to make sure that the candidate is someone who is going to be who is going to live the values of the organization, and who is going to push the envelope and push the bar and raise the bar within the team. And so that is another technique that I love to use, is to make sure that you are using people outside of the hiring team to make sure that you're bringing in high quality talent that is going to raise the expectations for the rest of the team. And then lastly, I like to make sure that I'm looking at quality of hire metrics. So there's few ways in which you can measure quality of hire. One is simply look at a rolling 12-month average of how many people were hired and how many of those are still around, and measure that over time. Some organizations also measure quality of hire a little bit differently and say, of all of the people we hired in the rolling 12 months, how many of those have ended up being top performers? And you decide what top performer means to you. Is it a 4 rating? Is it a 5 rating? Is it a 3? And then measure that over time to see how your quality of hire is trending.
Yeah, I like the top performer metric more, because you can just warm your seat, and that may not be sufficient bar raising the bar, right?
Exactly.
So we have a question from Raja. Thank you, Raja, for the question. The future of workforce is changing rapidly. How do HR leaders manage them, as they all prefer work-life balance than pay?
This is, I thank you for the question. I think what you're kind of referring to is workforce expectations are changing, right? People are coming in to the workplace with very different expectations around the role that work plays in their life. And especially post-pandemic, I think many of us started to reevaluate the primacy of work in our lives and our work identities versus our overall holistic identities. And so I think so much of this comes down to understanding what type of culture do you want to build. There are organizations that are very clear about, this, if you want work-life balance, this is not the place for you. And I've been in organizations like that, and I have scared people away in the interview process. And I would rather scare them away and be honest than have someone come in and be surprised in a negative way, right? So the first thing is to be very clear about what kind of organization you are and what are the expectations. The problems really start when expectations are not appropriately set during the interview process, and then people come in and they're surprised. And then if you do decide that you are an organization where you want to promote work-life balance, you want to promote a healthy culture of well-being, you want to promote balance, then you should also be clear about that. And if you have peak times, or you have a seasonal business, when, for example, I worked in a seasonal business where the year end was super busy and it was impossible for people to take time off. And we were very clear about that with individuals. And so people knew that, in the summer, I can kick back a little, I can take my vacations, etc. But in the winter, year end and winter, I'm going to be working probably long hours. And so I think that clarity is important. I would also say, if you are an organization that wants to promote well-being, don't put it all on the individual. I think when we think well-being and we think work-life balance, often our solutions are, oh, let's offer some yoga classes and meditation apps, right? So we make it the individual's problem. We put it on the individual to say, you are going to go do things. Here are some resources. I think if you have a systemic problem with burnout and you have a systemic work-life balance problem, then systemic problems require systemic solutions. So I would encourage you to think more on the enterprise level. What can we do, whether it's prioritization, whether it's promoting flexibility, whether it's training our managers to lead with flexibility and prioritize people's well-being. What can you do at the enterprise level if you've decided that well-being is important to you?
Yeah. 30 minutes is up. I did not realize the time went by listening to you and responding to the questions. That was great. We did not touch upon resilience. Maybe you want to say 30 seconds on resilience, the third topic that we are going to talk about. You want, yeah.
Yes, I'll give you kind of my quick spiel on resilience. I think in the age of AI and in the age of constant change, resilience is going to be one of the top leadership skills that we will need. In fact, this was just confirmed very recently by the World Economic Forum. They just released their 2025 Future of Jobs report, and resilience was identified as a top skill of the future. And how do you build resilience? Resilience is about bouncing back, right? So you can't bounce back if you never really fail or falter. And so it's about creating safe spaces for your organization and for your teams to quote unquote fail and to learn from those failures, and to create the psychological safety in your organization to create listening opportunities so that everyone's voice is heard. Even if you don't implement decisions that everyone else wants you to make, at least at the very minimum, making people feel heard contributes to resilience because you're bringing in diverse perspectives. So creating a safe space to fail and creating a safe space for people to amplify their voices are the top two tips I would give you to create resilience in your organization.
Example. And I know our time is up, but a question popped up on my head that I'm going to ask. You talked about communicating clearly the values of the organization, whether it is work-life balance or not. Is it okay as a CHRO to have an organization one way or the other, or is it okay to have an organization that does not promote work-life balance? What is your take on that?
My personal take is healthy employees are productive employees. So if you have an organization where people are constantly putting in 70-hour weeks, not taking enough time, that is eventually going to show up. Whether it shows up as productivity going down, or whether it shows up as absenteeism, or whether it shows up as your healthcare costs going up, because eventually...
Or turnover.
Turnover, exactly. Eventually it will show up. And so don't think that people in profit are at odds with each other, or people's well-being and profit are at odds with each other. In fact, healthy employees drive healthy organizations and drive the bottom line. So that is my personal perspective.
Yes, and thank you for that personal perspective because you scare you in your career you have scared people away.
I
So
have.
your so
Yes.
obviously you worked with organizations which did not prioritize that at one point in the past at least. All right, so let's wrap up the discussion today. We will still entertain audience questions if they come by, but to wrap up the discussion today, Malvika, tell us about Atlas Group, why you started, how people can reach out to you, why they should reach out to you. Just give, promote yourself.
Yes. So, Atlas Group, like I said, is a human capital advisory firm. We focus really in three areas: leadership development, employee experience, and change management and transformation. And so, if you need help in any of those areas, or we also provide fractional CHRO or interim CHRO services. So, if you need strategic HR leadership, Atlas Group is your place to go. If you have questions that we didn't get to today, reach out to me directly. I'm always happy to connect with folks on LinkedIn. Our website is atvisgroup.com. That's ATVIS group.com. We are also Atvis Group on Instagram. My email is malvika at atvisgroup.com. So shoot me a note if you want to chat anything and all things people.
Awesome. Fantastic. Well, Malvika, it was a pleasure hosting you this morning. I enjoyed it, learned quite a bit. Um,
Likewise.
and next time I need to help a client scale an organization, when we need a people leader, uh, I can reach out to Atvis. But no, it was a pleasure
Terrific.
hosting that aside. It was a pleasure hosting you, Malvika. Thanks for coming on the board and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you for having me. Take care.
You're welcome.